Have you ever wondered who owns the UFC, the Ultimate Fight Championship? This one? Who owns this whole organization? And what's it doing in American culture? And so I did some Google searching, and it's not that hard to find the answer. And the answer is pretty fucking weird. We'll cover a little bit of news. There's a whole bunch of stuff with Trump and the election. There's all kinds of viral stuff about Trump with 13-year-old girls going around the internet right now. A whole bunch of photos have resurfaced out of nowhere. A bunch of court dockets describing some very messed up scenarios and allegations. Twitter is very divided on what's real and what's not right now. Oh, we're going to feature one of the coolest small family founder owned businesses on the planet, very relevant to today, talking about taking back our culture, taking back our kids' education and lives. We've got a homemade homeschooling founder owned business on the roster today to talk about. One of my favorite content creators who I've been following since almost the very first day I got on social media. We've got RFK eating goats. We've got Candace Owens spitting fire, messing up all kinds of stuff in the mainstream media, getting called a Nazi and a racist and a whatever else, a white supremacist. Who would have thought you'd live to see the day when a black woman would be the number one white supremacist on the internet? I sure didn't. It's a crazy week. Happy 4th of July week. I got my BlackRock swag here. BlackRock, one nation under management with censorship and injustice for all. So we got a lot to do today. We're going to try to keep it in under 20 minutes. Let's get started.
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
With Republicans, with progressives, with libertarians, because this is not about right and left, this is about right and wrong.
It's so sacred we can't talk about it.
Our security is at stake.
Welcome to Cancel This. I'm your host, Ian Carroll. Welcome to the new studio. Welcome to the new digs. Welcome to the new show. Let's get into the main story of the day, the UFC. Who owns it and what's going on with it? If you're not familiar, the UFC is, MMA, mixed martial arts combat. It's taken US by storm. It's moved all over the world. It's become this big sensation. It's kind of overtaken American football as the leading sport in American culture today in a lot of ways. That's debatable. But without a doubt, the UFC has grown to be a figurehead of American culture, right alongside rap music and apple pie. And you don't have to do a whole lot of Googling to learn who owns the UFC. Most people think Dana White owns the UFC. But actually, Dana White is just the president, the figurehead, the face, the Joe Biden of the UFC, except a lot less sleepy and fortunately a lot more pro-free speech. They did, though, ban flags after a certain terrorist attack recently, just because, maybe they didn't want the UFC to turn super political and turn the arena into, who knows, an Israel rally or a Palestine rally or whatever. We'll see. When we find out who owns it, maybe you'll have an opinion. But you do your quick Google search, who owns the UFC, and pretty quickly you find out that the UFC was purchased by this private equity group called Endeavor. Okay, so who owns Endeavor? Well, Endeavor is a vast company with influence all around American culture, all around the globe, really. And they dabble in all kinds of sports and all kinds of media, entertainment, modeling, and they're run by a man named Ari Emanuel. You might know him from the show Entourage. The character named Ari in the show Entourage is based loosely off of this man, Ari Emanuel. And Ari Emanuel, let's just say he's got some spicy digs to do. But he's also got his business partner. What's his business partner's name? Ari Emanuel and Patrick Whitesell. And together, these two control an awful lot of things. See, the UFC is owned by this organization called TKO Group, of which Ari Emanuel is the CEO. But TKO Group is owned by Endeavor, of which Ari Emanuel is the executive chairman of the board of directors. So he is the top dog. He is in charge of this thing. He founded Endeavor himself, and he has made quite a name for himself. When you look up Ari Emanuel, you find some pretty interesting stuff about him. I like to use sources like Wikipedia because it's one of the most censored platforms there is. It's one of the most controlled media spaces there is. So it's extremely mainstream information. And if you're getting information from Wikipedia, you can dang well bet your ass that it is mainstream and accepted narratives by the powers that be. Very little gets through the net of Wikipedia, especially when you're talking about certain things related to Israel, things related to big corporations, things related to rich people. Those groups of people have a lot of sway over the editing at Wikipedia, and they can get things changed on their Wikipedia pages pretty easily. So if you're finding dirt on famous people, rich people, corporate people, Israeli people on Wikipedia, you're pretty much on the right path. If you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, find out stuff about conspiracy theories, things that are debunked and not true, you have to go other places, obviously. But Wikipedia is a good starting point. If you can find it there, you can dig a lot deeper. And so when I visited Ari Emanuel's Wikipedia page, I was a little surprised to learn that his father was Israeli. And he wasn't just any Israeli. He was born in Jerusalem, Benjamin M. Emanuel. He was a pediatrician, meaning a doctor for children, who was a member of the Irgun, a Zionist terrorist organization. Although on Ari's page, they're sure to say a Zionist paramilitary group. Got to use good words to make it sound clean on Ari's page so that his dad is not, branded as a terrorist outright. But it's just one click away to go to the Wikipedia page for the Irgun. And when you do that, you learn that the Irgun was the national military organization in the land of Israel, or Etzel. It was a Zionist paramilitary organization that operated in mandatory Palestine before Israel was a state. So if you remember, Palestine was its own thing, owned by the British Empire for decades. And then they gave it to Israel. They split the land up and gave Israel its territory right after World War II. This paramilitary organization was one of several terrorist groups run by Zionists that were, shall we say, intent on encouraging Palestinians and native peoples to leave. Because, how are you going to move in and start a settler colony when there's people living there? And I'm not the one calling them a terrorist organization. The Irgun was labeled a terrorist organization by the government of Israel itself. Everyone in the global community, the Jewish communities all around the world agreed that the Irgun was a terrorist organization. Because what the Irgun did was they bombed civilians with, classic terrorist tactics like, IEDs, bombs placed in public places where they would kill civilians and make life generally very unwelcoming for regular people there and make them think, maybe I should leave, right? His dad, Ari Emanuel's dad, was a member of the Irgun. Right there on Wikipedia. He was a Zionist terrorist. And if you look at a list of the terror attacks perpetrated by the Irgun, you can scroll through it. It's on Wikipedia. I'm sure it's not perfect. I'm sure it's just, what is there. But you'll notice that it's just a list of small bombings of civilian infrastructure in civilian locations. And if you add up all the number of civilians that were killed in these bombings, I can't help but wonder, is it more or less than have died in the last year since October 7th at the hands of IDF bombs? Anyways, definition of terrorism, very complicated, very hard to understand. You should really trust the experts. Don't take my word for it. Irgun, terrorist organization. IDF, very different, except that the IDF directly grew out of the forces that were the Irgun. It says so right here on the Wikipedia page that as the Irgun disbanded, it grew and evolved into several other organizations that eventually became the IDF. But we digress. Because Ari Emanuel, who runs Endeavor, is actually just one piece of a three-brother family. See, Benjamin Emanuel, our terrorist buddy, had 3 sons, and all 3 of his sons have gone on to live pretty interesting lives. Let's meet Rahm Emanuel. Right now, he's the United States ambassador to Japan, and a lot of Americans don't realize how strategically important Japan is. That's a big deal. Being the ambassador to Japan, a big responsibility. You might want to appoint someone who is not the son of a terrorist to do that, but what do I know? I mean, let's be real. But Rahm has held some pretty spicy positions in his time. Notably, he was the White House chief of staff for Barack Obama. Interesting. And he was also a member of the Clinton administration. So Rahm Emanuel has been a very prominent member of the Democratic Party for quite some time. Interesting. Son of a terrorist. How about Ezekiel Emanuel? Well, Ezekiel Emanuel has a pretty deep statey resume. He's a senior fellow at CAP, the Center for American Progress. Whole other story. He's a member of the Wharton School, a professor at the Wharton School, CIA recruiting grounds, Harvard Medical School, and the National Institute of Health, the NIH. Interesting. Oh, yeah. In November of 2020, President-elect Joe Biden named Emanuel to be one of the 16 members of his COVID-19 advisory board. Interesting. Son of a terrorist. That's strange. So, it turns out that you can be a terrorist and your family can go on to do great things. I can't help but wonder, how did they get all the money to found all of these organizations, to achieve all of this status and influence in the modern world? Who decided on that? Who put that? How'd that work out? You know, just questions you start to ask when you start to learn things. So, the UFC is owned by Ari Emanuel, who, the deeper you dig, you realize that he is one of the main power brokers in Hollywood and the cultural media landscape. Because he doesn't just own the UFC. Oh, no. His company, Endeavor, runs all kinds of other things. They're up in all sorts of sports leagues all around the world, different tournaments, different events. They run a whole bunch of modeling, him and his buddy Patrick Whitesell. And a lot of that modeling is linked to certain pageants like Miss Teen USA, Miss Universe. Where's my exact documents on it? Where are my documents on it? Do I not have my documents on it? I think we're going to have to open up a fucking tab for this. Did they change the Wikipedia page since I was here last? I am very confused. I was just here yesterday. Holy shit. See, this rabbit hole just keeps on giving. You just can't end it. ICM is owned by Creative Artist Agency. Creative Artist Agency was this agency that initially sold the concept of the show, The Jackson 5. Way back. They're all connected. Oh, Courtney Love contends that she was blacklisted since 2005 by CAA for making a comment about the now disgraced producer Harvey Weinstein. See, they all look out for each other. IMG. Okay, it is still on his Wikipedia page. I get it. Cool. So when you look up IMG, International Management Group, they are a massive talent and modeling agency that formerly owned Miss Universe, Miss USA, Miss Teen USA, etc. A lot of names that make me think of Jeffrey Epstein and the various places that he would recruit girls from. And it turns out that IMG was actually prolific in the industry of sending girls to Jean-Luc Brunel and probably many other people associated with Epstein. Let's just say that there were lots of women that reported issues with Jean-Luc Brunel and Jeffrey Epstein over in Europe, where they were being sent by IMG, this modeling agency. And then IMG continued to send girls over there to do stuff. So we've got Ari Emanuel with his hands in modeling, in media, in sports, in all sorts of facets of American life. Son of an Israeli terrorist. You can't help but wonder. Think about your dad and think about how he raised you and think about what you know about the world and how you act and who you are. Your father, as a man, your father is a huge part of determining who you become, who you grow up to be as a man. So I can't help but wonder, what did Ari's dad teach him about the world? What did Ari's dad teach him about equality and about inclusiveness and about kindness and about terrorism? Just a thought. But anyways, I've already said way too much. I've already gotten my YouTube channel in trouble before we even really launched the YouTube channel. So let's move on. On to the news. One of the biggest news pieces floating around on X this last week has been all of this Trump revelation that is actually not revelations at all. And the whole internet is just filled with tweets like this one, like, why is everyone silent on this? Why is the mainstream media not reporting on this? Crickets. Weird. And, when you dig into it, it starts to make sense why it might be crickets. Let's see if you can figure it out, right? Because now, apparently, Jeffrey Epstein's secret documents were just released because of a Palm Beach Post lawsuit. So, new documents just released with some more phone records, some more stuff, but a lot of what's circulating on the internet is actually not new at all. Like this lawsuit that was brought against Trump back in 2016, right before that election, when this woman accused him of doing horrible things to her when she was a 13-year-old girl. That woman subsequently withdrew the lawsuit. It was a big thing. People called her a liar. Some people said believe her. She got paid off. There was all kinds of rumors. Nobody knows. Apparently, her story was discredited. The Daily Mail reported that she had made it all up and that it was all discredited. Although their source was anonymous, it's hard to say what was what. But the one thing I will say is timing is important. Pay attention to timing. And I don't know one way or another what's real or what's not. Trump is not a standout guy. He is not some hero, and I am not some Trump sycophant. But timing matters. And when you look at the timing of all of the previous Trump allegations of assault and such, they all came out right before the election in 2016. And none of them seemed to hold enough water to stick. Fast forward, and we have 4 more years, and then 4 more years. And now, just now, right before an election, right at this critical moment when Joe Biden is maybe stepping down and a new candidate is coming up, when Trump has just apparently beaten a lot of the charges that were brought against him. He was like this felon, and now suddenly he might not be. Who knows what's going on? And it's just interesting that they choose to time all of these things to blow up right when they need it to. And then suddenly the internet is flooded with photos of Trump with 13-year-old girls from parties back in the day with Epstein. And the only problem is that when you look at the photos, you realize really quickly that they're almost all AI generated. And some of them are just straight up Photoshop. But none of them, the ones that are circulating right now like wildfire, are actual photos. And that's pretty weird. If you're a Democrat that's spreading these photos, it doesn't do you any service to spread AI photos just to push your narrative. And if you're a bad actor who is intentionally spreading these things, I think we all know why. So anyways, it's worth mentioning that this lawsuit that has been floating all around Twitter, that everyone's bringing up, that everyone's quoting from about this whole allegation of 13-year-old girl and like sexual assault, and it's corroborated by, it's an anonymous claim corroborated by an anonymous witness. They both used fake names. It got, it got filed back in 2016. And you can see that right there on the documents. And suddenly it's being thrown all over X as though it was brand new, as though it just came out. That's a little weird, guys. Like, context matters. So, do with that what you will. That gets paired with Elizabeth Warren screaming for the Supreme Court to get expanded. To be fair, though, Trump is all up in the Epstein call logs. Trump and Epstein were, shall we say, quite close. And I'll have to do a whole other episode on it sometime. But my take on Trump is actually pretty different than all the Trump supporters have this, like, he's perfect, he's the golden boy, he's the messiah, kind of like he can do no wrong. All the way from there to the Democrats that are like, Trump is an evil arist who assaults women and is so racist and just the most misogynistic pig, felon. They got all their buzzwords. And on both sides, that's like, neither of those are very connected to reality. Trump was mentored by Roy Cohn. Trump grew up in the rich, blackmailing corporate world. He grew up with bankers, with Israelis, with power brokers, and he was mentored by one of the kingpins of the 40s and 50s blackmail era. Roy Cohn was instrumental to the blackmail operation that was perpetrated against J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, on behalf of the Jewish mob and the Italian mafia. Meyer Lansky, the Blue Room, the Plaza Hotel. Look it up. Trump, later on, proceeded to buy the Plaza Hotel, the place where the Blue Suite existed that was wired up with cameras that Roy Cohn had made instrumental to his business and power base. Trump later bought that hotel, and he overextended his financial position to do it. When I look at Trump, and I look at his rise to power, and I look at how he acts, I see someone that probably understands the blackmail industry very well, maybe even participated in it. And that would explain why Trump does not party, Trump does not drink, Trump does not do drugs. Number one rule of the blackmail world: don't be blackmailed. Furthermore, Trump seems to have power in a lot of ways that don't quite make sense. He's a total outsider. He's this media celebrity, and yet somehow he rose to the position of the president of the United States of America. And certainly a lot of that was on his outsider status, his wild card status. But I just can't help but wonder, like, does Trump have blackmail on other people? Does Trump know things that most of us don't? That would explain Trump's relationship with Epstein, his subsequent takedown of Epstein. Like, Trump was the president in office when Epstein got taken down. Had Bill Clinton been the guy in office, I can't help but think that maybe Epstein probably would have not gone to jail, probably not unalived himself, whatever it is. So that's all I'll say about Trump for now. Do your own research, make your own decisions. In other news, WikiLeaks posted again. Now that Julian Assange is free, after fucking over a decade, I think, of living in a tiny cubicle 23 hours a day of isolation, like inhumane treatment, just for the act of journalism, just for reporting the truth, just for publishing leaked information on the internet, something that every journalist does, something that the New York Times does, the New York Post does, the San Francisco does, everyone does it. And they went after Julian Assange with reckless abandon and set the precedent that all journalists can be treated that way if you publish something that the state, the deep state, does not want you to publish. What was it that he published that was so controversial? Maybe you should ask Hillary about that. Maybe you should ask Anthony Weiner about that. I don't know. I don't know why they treated him the way he did. I'm just a guy speculating on the internet. You should do your own speculation. But WikiLeaks finally posted again. But they didn't post to the WikiLeaks website. As far as I can tell, the WikiLeaks website is still inert, in limbo. Nothing new on there since 2021. Instead, WikiLeaks posted to X. Right on. Score one for X and free speech. And WikiLeaks posted this link to this article that is originally in Hebrew. Yeah, now we're talking. See, I'm not that smart. And when you translate it, this is a document from within the Israeli state apparatus talking about how their goal post October 7th is to get all of the people in Gaza out of Gaza permanently. That was their plan ever since, I believe this was published early October, like October 10th to 17th, something in that time range. And like a good source, that article cites the document itself in full PDF format right there for you, so you can see what they're citing. Score one for good journalism. Nice work, guys. Score one for Julian Assange. So glad you're out of that fucking cell, buddy. Hopefully the rest of your life is filled with love and happiness and family. It's inexcusable what they did to you. It's inexcusable that multiple presidents came and went without pardoning you. That should be a wake-up call to every American citizen that there's way more going on behind the scenes and that it's not left and right. Both lefts and rights treated him the way they treated him because both lefts and rights are hugely incentivized to destroy free speech, to undermine journalism, and to keep our information space controlled. Hence what we're doing here. So, thank goodness that saga has, come to somewhat of a close, but not before the New York Times decided to launch a new and ongoing attack on freedom of speech, the First Amendment. Quote, "The First Amendment is out of control." Okay, journalism. If you needed any more confirmation that the New York Times was not journalism, there you go. The New York Times is a part of the state apparatus of control, and what they publish is controlled in order to control you. You're welcome. In other news, I was on the Redacted podcast with Clayton Morris. We had an awesome hour-long discussion. You should definitely go check it out. Give Clayton Morris and Redacted a follow if you don't already. I'm sure you know them and love them. Clayton and his wife Natalie are two of the best journalists of our time, and they're breaking down the real stories of what's really going on out there in no uncertain terms every day of the week. Legendary people. It was so great to talk to Clayton. Thank you, Clayton. More on that to come in the future. And then in other fun news, one last little tidbit on the GameStop saga, which is going on in the background, and most people don't know anything about it, and that's just fine. You'll know all about it before too long. But recently, Roaring Kitty, deep fucking value, Keith Gill, our guy, he bought Chewy. Chewy, a pet company. Why would he buy a pet company? Well, Ryan Cohen, the CEO of GameStop, first founded Chewy. That was his shining jewel. That's what he came to fame on. He built Chewy up, beat Amazon out of the pet industry online, selling bags of pet food, selling pet supplies, sending out pet love cards, pet thank yous, etc. And Chewy became a multi-billion-dollar business that Ryan Cohen sold before he went into GameStop to turn around GameStop. Chewy's doing its thing over there. Keith Gill recently bought a 9 million share stake in Chewy. Actually, he bought the exact same number of shares as he owns of GameStop, which is the exact same number of shares as Ryan Cohen's initial buy into GameStop, which just seems like a weird coincidence. It seems like an homage, a shout out, a bit of tinfoil, some breadcrumbs, who knows? But what we do know officially on legal record now is that Keith Gill is not a cat. That's right, folks. It's in the official SEC filing. Keith Gill is not a cat. I have no idea how he got this into the fucking document. That's not supposed to be there. And last I checked, the SEC was not big on having jokes and memes in their filings, but somehow he got it in there. And that's fucking amazing. Just thought that was great to share. There will be a lot more to share on that in the coming weeks. Hold tight. If you're holding on to GameStop, you don't go anywhere. Now for my favorite section of all, our featured founder. Founder-owned business of the week is the Classical Learner. Our boy Brett founded this homeschool company on his own because he wasn't satisfied with the state of education in America, as all of you should feel too. We'll talk another week about the state of education and how education is bought and paid for in order to indoctrinate your kids with bullshit. I've been doing a deep dive in the background into who owns all the textbooks and why they have the information in them that they have. And it's fucking spicy. But this week, we're going to feature Brett because Brett has been publishing a series of books called Cubs to Bears, which is all about everything we talk about on this channel. And it's taught in a way that your kids can understand. Things like the history of the Federal Reserve, the history of banking, the history of the corporate media, the history of corporate control, the history of government as a state of control. This is the book series for your kids. If you don't like the government telling you what to do, if you're concerned about the corruption in our world, if you want your kids to get a real education, you got to check out theclassicallearner.com. Even if your kids are in public school, even if your kids go to any regular schooling situations, this is the ultimate supplement for your kids, whether it's just the books, whether it's his homeschool programming that you can use with them in your spare time. This will change their lives. The time you invest in your kids now will forever shape their brains until they become adults and onwards. It will shape their kids' future. It will shape all of our future. I am a teacher. I was raised by two teachers, and everything I do is basically coming from the perspective of education. Our world is full of fucked up problems that are really hard to solve, hard to unpack, hard to rewind time to simpler things. You can't really go back. All we can do is educate ourselves forwards into a better future. And the way you do that is by educating ourselves as adults and educating especially our kids as the future generations that will be running this country. So go to theclassicallearner.com. Brett just got his books publishing and production and shipping all completely Amazon free. He is now outside of the Amazon networks of control. He can now publish and ship these books directly to you, all within his own apparatus, and does not require Jeff Bezos to facilitate it for him. So you go to classicallearner.com. This is not a sponsored, by the way. Brett's not paying me to say this. He's just a total homie, and this is just me featuring his business on the show because he's a badass. Get these books, get his lesson plans, change your kids' lives. You will not regret it. Theclassicallearner.com. You're welcome. Lastly, let's move on to some comments. Here's a good one from Snapback Pop. This is in response to the AI photos of Trump. He says they're setting the stage to be able to deny any pics or vids coming out in regards to Drazzlefrip, etc. Now, I wouldn't undo that pig Latin and say those words on this video because YouTube would be unhappy. If you know, you know. And Snapback Pop brings up a good point that you got to think a few moves ahead, where if you flood the space with, deep fakes and bad, low quality AI photos, if you flood the space with misinformation and distruth, then when the real truth comes out, how is anyone going to know that it is true? So keep your eyes peeled, stay sharp, think very critically about what is in our media spaces. And to close it out, we've got Gaia Ambassador with the theme of the day: circuses and bread, baby. Circuses and bread. Think about what you're eating. Think about what you're consuming. Think about what is being given to you to pacify your mind so that you don't pay attention to the bigger picture. What's our entertainment space made out of? What is our media space made out of? What's the news telling you? What's being fed to your soul and your body in order to keep you complacent and to keep you consuming the regular drip feed of bullshit in America and around the world so that you don't wake up to what's really going on? That's what we're all about here. They're going to try to cancel us. They've tried before. They'll try again. Fuck it. Let's go. I'm ready for it. You're ready for it. We're all here for it. This is 2024. Media war is in full effect. I talk about it a lot, how in the past, war was fought kinetically. Before World War II, war was guys with guns, guys with swords, going at it on a battlefield, killing each other. Today, that is not how war is fought. Ever since the nuclear bomb was invented, war has been fought on the Cold War battlefield, which is the battlefield of culture, the battlefield of the mind. Ever since nuclear weapons were invented and the Cold War began, it has never ended, because now battles are fought in our information spaces. If you are Russia or China and you want to influence America, you want to take America down, you don't do it by fighting America with guns. Obviously, you're going to lose. What you do is you try to subvert America by feeding bad information, by feeding unhealthy messaging, by subverting the very foundations of our society, be that their family structures, be that our food systems, be that our technology systems, our communication networks. All of those are perfect targets to attack. And we do the same thing to other countries too. That's just the nature of this fifth generation of warfare that we now live in. But the problem is that when that's the mode of warfare, that means that our Twitter feed is the battlefield. Your Instagram feed is where that disinformation takes place. On your Facebook profile is where the Russian disinformation floods in. So how do you counter that? If you're the CIA and you're tasked with protecting America and getting the big picture of the global conflict and what do you do about it, how do you protect American citizens from disinformation being flooded in by foreign actors? The only way to do that is to seal off the information space from bad information coming in from foreign actors. But we live in a free country and we have free speech and there's no borders on the internet. And so you can't really stop bad information from coming in. So instead, what you're forced to do is you're forced to flood with good information, right? The only way to counter disinformation being fed in from bad actors is to flood the space with good information. That's the CIA's job. But what is good information? You see, we live in a world today where it is the CIA's job, the NSA's job, to fill our Twitter feeds with propaganda that will counter all the bad information coming in from bad actors out there. You make your judgments as to who's a good actor and who's a bad actor. But regardless, everyone has a stake in what you see in your media space. And that's not just governments, it's also corporations that want you to buy things. It's also special interest groups that want you to believe things. It's also billionaires that want to stroke their little dick egos. So, when you're scrolling through your Twitter feed, when you're opening your Facebook account, just remember, everyone has an incentive to change your mind about things. And it's your responsibility as an American citizen, as a proud patriot, as a human being to think critically. Gone are the days of having the news tell you what's real and having you eat that shit up as though it was fucking A-okay. We live in 2024. And in 2024, nothing is as it seems. That's all for today. This has been Cancel This. I'm your host, Ian Carroll. I'll see you on the next one.
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
With Republicans, with progressives, with libertarians, because this is not about right and left, this is about right and wrong.
It's so sick that we can't talk about it.
Our security is at stake.